right. Welcome, everyone. We have a very special guest today on Compliance Corner. But before we get started, let me just introduce ourselves. I'm Orly. I am the Director of Marketing at Prevail. And you are?
I am Noel Vestal. I'm the Head of Compliance at Prevail.
All right. And we have a wonderful guest who's joining us today, Sese Bennett from Provencia. Sese, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, since you probably know yourself best, and tell us a little bit about what Provencia is, what you guys do, and why you guys are so awesome.
So my name is Sese Bennett. I am the CEO and President at Provencia Government Solutions. Provencia Government Solutions, we're a firm that's focused on government services. So we provide different types of assessment and consulting services to the government agencies and subcontractors and other commercial organizations that support the government. So I think we're really awesome because we have a bunch of awesome people that work for us. We've been doing this for about 40 years, total experience for the company. And Provencia itself has been in business since about 2018. We spun off of a larger company back in 2018 so that we could focus on the government space, because we found that the larger organization, with so many regulations and requirements, they thought it would be better for us to be able to do it that way. And it gave us the opportunity to really look at some new technologies and ways that we can help companies to be secure. And that kind of got us into the whole CMMC DIB area, and we're happy to be here.
All right, and we're happy to have you. And hat tip to our colleague Jamie for recommending that we talk to you, because we're going to have a great conversation today about something that we haven't really talked about all that much, although it should be.
Not really.
It's kind of surprising.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. Right. So as always, we talk about CMMC compliance on this show, but what we haven't really talked about is all of the assessments that people go through along the way. And so today's show is going to be entitled, what you need to do to be ready for an assessment. And it's kind of almost a punchline, because there are essentially, as I'm finding out, lots of assessments that you have to go through in order to be CMMC ready, or at this point, NIST 800-171 ready. So kind of like as our first point, we were thinking about what exactly are the various types of assessment readiness reviews that you will come across as you're getting ready for CMMC/NIST. Does you want to jump in there?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. So there's a lot of different assessments you can have, right? So everybody, everybody can really probably give you a different opinion about which assessments are required, but it's really going to depend upon the company. So some organizations will approach assessments or readiness assessments from the perspective of, I don't need any readiness assessment and I'm just going to go for it.
Let's just be clear. When you say go for it, you mean go ahead and have a voluntary assessment. Right.
Yeah, go for the
we would not recommend that.
Right.
It's not a good idea.
Don't
10 C3PAOs do not recommend.
Don't do that. Definitely
do not recommend that. That puts you kind of a really dangerous position, especially
expensive, very expensive.
Expensive position. And then some organizations, think about, do I need to have 4 or 5 assessments? And that's probably on the other side of the spectrum, and that's not recommended at all. So what I would always communicate to individuals that are looking for kind of the path is that you really have the opportunity to do a couple of different assessments. So as far as readiness assessments are concerned, if you're a brand new company and this is brand new to CMMC and you're just kind of figure out your path for this, then I would encourage those organizations to reach out and do a gap assessment, right? So that's the first type, a gap assessment. If you've been doing CMMC for a while and you feel that your environment is at a spot where you're comfortable moving forward with the assessment, then you may be ready to reach out to a C3PAO. And if you do that, I would still encourage you to look at doing some type of dry run assessment with that C3PAO. The reason we recommend that is because the dry run is going to be performed from the perspective of the same organization that's going to be assessing you. So if they find something during the dry run, although they can't tell you whether, how to go out and fix it, they can't give you any type of remediation advice, they can't consult. but you do know which ones you have to go and take care of for them to consider you an acceptable candidate for the continued process. So that's one of the things that we encourage individuals to do, is to go and do that dry run. And then once you're done the dry run, then you can go through the process, the early parts of the planning process in the CMMC, the actual assessment. And from there, they will go through a process and tell you officially that you are ready to proceed forward with the assessment. So everything up to the point of doing the actual assessment and doing that readiness as part of the planning process is unofficial. When you get to the planning process and you do that part of the readiness, then that's the official readiness that has to be considered by the C3PAO to make sure that you're ready, and then they can go and proceed forward with the actual assessment.
And then the dry run, just because I think that's something that I know we haven't really talked about a lot, and I don't think that a lot of people really know that that's an option that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think too, just, kind of putting my hat on as a member of the DIB trying to go through this, right? It would be really advantageous, if I have a C3PO I've already engaged, right? It would be really advantageous to do a dry run, right? Because then that way they can get more familiar with the system, and then in theory, it's going to make for a smoother assessment process, right? Or am I off on that?
Yeah, definitely. It'll make for a smoother phase one, that planning process, because I think that's where a lot of individuals probably trip up, right? So they think that they're ready. They go through the entire process. Their subcontractor or their third party assessor or the RPO comes in and says, "Yeah, you're ready. You're ready to go." So they go and they start the process, and then they get through the process to the planning process. And then during the planning, the C3PO tells them, "Hey, well, you guys missed this. You're not ready to do this. Can you be ready?" And then they kind of put you sort of in an odd position. So if you go through that dry run, you sort of avoid that because you know where you stand once you hit that planning process.
And let me ask you this too. So if you can do the dry run with the same C3PO that's going to do your full assessment, right? And again, like you said, it's just a checkbox of yes or no. It's no detail. It's not, I just say to you, yeah, you have this one, fine, or no, you don't. And that's the end of it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the other thing too that I wanted to ask is, so if I'm doing a dry run as a company, is another advantage, because like you just mentioned about a consulting group, right? So if I have consultants come in and they've told me yeah, you're totally ready to go, is another advantage. I mean, this is, again, putting my little DIB hat on. My thought would be, oh, this is a good way for me to make sure that, these consultants actually knew what they were talking about. And I hate to say that, but unfortunately, there are some consultants out there who maybe are not as good as others. We've definitely talked about that on here. Is that another advantage that you can see from that too?
Yeah, I definitely see that. And, when you talk about a dry run, most people go, well, what's the value in that, right? I want my value. I want recommendations. I want you to tell me what I need to do to fix it to be ready. Right? So, and there is value in having the recommendations, but you have to separate the recommendations, which is a consulting engagement, from the assessment, which is a certification engagement. So, but having that dry run, it's not going to give you all that detail. You're responsible for figuring out all that detail ahead of that. Once you get to that dry run, you pretty much want to be ready. You don't want anything on that dry run, right? You want that to be spotless so that you can move on to the next step and you can just chuck on through that certification assessment. The easier you make it for your C3PAO when they get to do your assessment, the easier your assessment's going to be. That
right there, golden words. And I also feel too, I mean, I would even look at it as a positive way. I would want to get validated for the things I did right, if I feel like I did something right, I want somebody who's the expert, right? You guys are the experts to go, yeah, you really did do this right. It's oh, okay, good. I can feel confident going into this assessment that I did this correctly.
Let me just jump in with one thing that I got from talking to you earlier, Sese, is that you can't have the same company do your initial kind of gap assessment and your voluntary assessment, or the actual voluntary assessment, or even that dry run, right? It's kind of like there's that line in the sand, and the twain shall not meet, right?
Exactly.
Which you would think you'd want one company to do all of them, all steps of that, but it cannot be done.
Yeah, it'll cause issues, definite issues inside of your environment as far as independence and thinking, keeping things separate, because you really can't have you can't have the same company that's assessing your environment be the one that created your environment, because then they're assessing their own work, right? So,
right.
Exactly.
I give myself an A.
A for everyone. Everyone gets an A.
Yeah. So I guess the next thing that we want to talk about, we've talked a little bit at the high level about those 3 types of assessments. And that's, I think, something that people hadn't quite thought about all of that. But, what would a C3PAO do that that the gap assessment person would not do, and vice versa? What are the plus and minuses of each?
Yeah. So let's start with the third, the outside vendor, or the third, the person that you come, not C3PO. Let's talk about the outside vendor that you bring in, the consulting organization. So that consulting organization has a lot more leeway as to what they can do for you as a company. Right? So they can do everything from write your policies and procedures, write your SSP, help define your environment, implement technology. They can do all of those various aspects. They pretty much have free reign, no restraints or constraints on them as to what they can do. So that's great for that part of it. And
the way you, sorry, Sese, the way that you phrased it earlier, I think was like spot on. That as far as the C3PO is concerned, that's like a member of your organization. It's like that consulting company becomes like an employee, as far as you guys see it, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was such a really good way of putting it. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. As far as that relationship is concerned, you're hiring them to be an employee for you to get your environment in shape. And they can do whatever you tell them to do. Now, when you kind of go on the other side of the fence and you look at it from a third-party assessor organization, or C3PAO, there's limits as to what they can do. Right? They're there to assess only. Right? They're not there to consult. They're not there to offer advice or opinions. So they're going to come in. They're going to assess the environment as it currently is, and that's all they can do. So there's a clear line of delineation right there between what a consulting organization can do and then what a third-party assessor can do. You muted Orly.
Some people might say that's a good thing, like Orly should be muted more often.
I would.
You wouldn't say that. All right. So you can keep on doing Compliance Corner with me, Noel. Thank you.
I was hoping so.
So, I think, so we've talked about what each of those preparation steps looks like. What do you need as a DIB person in order to kind of be ready for each of those? Because the level of preparation for, let's say, that gap analysis is going to be a lot less than you need for that readiness assessment at the end.
Yeah. So one thing that I think, and this kind of goes to your previous question, and I'll kind of tie the two together. One thing that I didn't mention is the biggest area or the biggest benefit to doing that gap assessment is to really understand your environment. And a lot of times it's not just for the third party to come in and understand your environment. It's for you to understand your environment, because a lot of people, a lot of the DIBs, they have these environments, and they have, their job is to support the United States, right? Their job is not to figure out security for multi-factor authentication and all that kind of stuff. So this is a different environment for them. This is a different job description that they're trying to accomplish. So the thing that you have to consider in that type of scenario is how knowledgeable is your third party, whether it's an RPO, whether it's some other company, or whether it's a third party assessment organization that's coming in to do the assessment that's not associated with your with your certification assessment. Okay. So, I know we start throwing around all these terms and they get confusing, but you can always have a third party assessment organization work with you in the beginning, as long as they're not the same third party assessment organization that's doing the assessment for certification. Okay.
So for just that kind of initial gap assessment, I mean, should someone go ahead and have ready obviously they should know where CUI, control unclassified information, is in their environment. They should probably have a system security plan and SSP ready. Probably some basic understanding that they're going to have to train their employees. Mm-hmm. I mean, Or am I assuming that people already know this? And I mean,
No, you're right. People don't know this, and that's where that knowledgeable individual comes into play, right? So, an organization that's not a C3PAO can come in and do the assessment. They can do the technical work. They can see whether you check the box. But do they know that you need to have an SSP? Do they know that the SSP has to be written in a certain way to make sure it includes all of the requirements and that it supports your environment as a whole? Do they understand the importance of CUI and FCI and the data flows and things around that? Most of your C3PAOs are going to understand that, and have a very good handle on how they can actually implement that inside of your environment. So that's where a third-party assessment organization can bring some knowledge to the table that an RPO or maybe some other non-CMMC type of affiliated organization won't be able to bring that to the table.
Right.
So they would need to know all of those things that you mentioned, Orly. They would need to understand, what documentation they need to have in place. They need to understand things like data marking. Is that media marking? Is that included? I mean, most organizations that don't deal with government data don't understand that. It doesn't come up. Doesn't come up in conversation, right? Does the organization understand that if you have an enclave that's for FCI data, is that different from your enclave for your ITAR data? Most of us that work in the government space, we deal with ITAR, and we kind of speak that language.
It could be both. CUI and ITAR.
Yeah, exactly. We deal with both of them. So there's some inherent knowledge in the C3PAO base that may not be apparent in some of the other areas. But yeah, there's a number of things that you would want to have in place. There's some things that are more important than other things as well. Some areas that you really want to spend more time on, and some areas that you may not want to focus a lot of time on. Anybody can come in and help you to get your security awareness and training program in place, right? And I'm not taking away from anybody that does that, but yeah. But for someone to come in and say, okay, let's talk about your configuration management and your change management processes and how we can make those work. That's sort of a deeper knowledge set than some of your organizations that may not be familiar with CMMC or NIST or some of the other requirements. That may be a little bit over their head, that you may not get the best benefit from using them.
And that's something that we've talked about before here on Compliance Corner, about what sort of are the, not necessarily red flags, but sort of the things to look out for when you're getting a consultant. And that was a great summation of it. You need somebody who's going to have that experience and understanding of NIST, of CMMC, of what that really takes. And like you said, it's great if you can get me my security training, but do you understand what a configuration baseline is? Do you know how I'm going to get one? How am I going to do that? How are we going to implement that? What does that take? Yeah. What technologies are involved, what policies need to be written, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was exactly, I applaud you. That was perfect.
So for that dry run that you're going to hopefully go through, which is probably a good thing for anyone before they go through the rigors of a voluntary assessment, you should, I'm assuming you probably want everything just as buttoned up as it can be. You want to know that you have answers to all of the 800 171A assessment objectives, that you're able to explain how you meet them, or how you inherit them from a provider. I mean, what would you say to that question of what you should have in place in order to, when you think that you're ready, or before you believe that you're ready for that dry run?
Yeah, I would say you want to. So let's talk about the joint surveillance program versus the CMMC program, because there's really, they're trying to get you to the same place. They're just doing it in different ways. So you guys know, for the voluntary assessment program, you're really getting assessed against the 800 171A. Right?
Yep.
So for that one, you want to make sure that you have all your controls met. Obviously, you want to make sure that you can show due diligence and consistency throughout your security program. So that's an area that a lot of people struggle with. Right? So when they're going through the process and they're setting up their environment for CMMC, they get it set up, but then no one really manages that environment consistently going forward, or they can't show that consistency, that history over time. Now, with CMMC 2.0 versus the old version that we used to have, a lot of those maturity requirements have gone away, obviously, but we still want to make sure that 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 aspect of the security governance and management processes in their environment haven't been set up yesterday. What really shows that they're consistently following those kind of things. Just make sure you cover the small things. The big things will be glaring, and everybody covers the big things. The small things, do you have signatures? Do you have signatures on all your policies and procedure documentation? Right. So a lot of people miss that. Things like when you're going through your ports, protocols, and services on your identification and authorization controls. Are you making sure that you have everything in place? Are you only doing it on your servers, on your firewalls? Are you ignoring your workstation? So you want to make sure you have all that documented, and you go through each of the controls. And this is a very important one. As you go through the controls, you want to make sure that you address every aspect of the control. So these assessments are a little different. If you've ever been through most government audits and assessments, we kind of look at the control as a whole, right? Are you meeting the spirit of the control?
Right.
CMMC is a little different in that they want to make sure that you're meeting the entire control. So AC is a good, access control is a good one. AC2, that's everybody's favorite control. AC2 has like 50 million parts to it. And we're used to looking at AC2 and go, okay, you meet the requirement as a whole. But now we have to look at AC2A, AC2B, AC2C, on down the line.
And all the way down.
Yeah, all the way down.
All the way down.
And a lot of people are not used to that. They're used to looking at, I meet AC, but did you meet this part of AC? Can you show me that you meet it? So that's
not just, do you think you meet it, but show me the paper, like show me the money. Show me
where are the receipts? I need the receipts.
Trust to verify, right? But,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's the important thing, and I think that's probably the area that most people will struggle the most on. So that's on 800-171 for those assessments. For the CMMC assessments, it's basically the same type of things that you want to look for, but on the CMMC assessments, when we get to that point, I think we'll have a better understanding of really kind of how the flow of some of these assessments are going. Once we get sort of past that initial stage, I'm hoping that'll be soon, mid next year. But cross your fingers. But for the most part, the assessment process is going to be pretty much the same. You won't, at that point, for the most part, you won't have a Department of Defense, a DIPCAC individual, riding along with you. But you still have to meet the same type of requirements, except they won't be officially the 800-171 A requirements. They'll be the CMMC 2.0 requirements.
Right.
So there isn't really a point at which you're done. It's like you're never done maturing in this process. No. But you were mentioning before we jumped on the show that in order to be considered, somewhat ready and at least get a preliminary readiness stamp of approval, you have to meet a certain number of controls of the NIST 800-171 standards. Do you want to just discuss that a little more?
Sure. So, and this will apply to the CMMC program, right? So, in the 800-171 program, the provisional assessment program that's going on right now, did I say provisional assessment? No, I'm sorry. Not provisional. I was like, that didn't make sense.
Voluntary.
Yeah, exactly. So for the early adopters program, this does not necessarily apply because they're going to allow those early adopters to really kind of go through more of a traditional POAM process versus this process that I'm about to talk about. So for CMMC 2.0 official program, they are requiring all of the DIB contractors that are going through the OSCs to at least meet 88 out of 110 controls, or roughly 80%, in order to qualify to go through or to use POAMs as the next step for remediating some of the less severe issues that may be present in the environment. So,
and really quick, just to interject, and there is a very specific list of controls that can be POAMs, right? There's so when we say 88 out of 110, we're not saying, okay, great, you just do 88 out of 110 and you don't have to worry about the other ones. It's
Yeah,
It's a
exactly.
very specific list. And like you said, I think we were talking earlier, that list of poamable, I'll make that word.
Ooh,
Poamable, I know, poamable.
Webster's Dictionary of 2023. Poamable.
But those poamable items, like we had talked before, are not the high ticket items, if you will. It's not like MFA and FIPS encryption is on there. It's very rudimentary, more like policy procedure type of stuff. I think there's maybe one or two little technology things, but for the most part, right, it's relatively minor on the list of the 110 things, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's POAMs, and then there's also another small provision for a small number of controls for like policies and procedures. That's really at the discretion of the C3PAO based on some requirements from the CMMC AB. So, but overall, they're not, like you said, like you call them, high ticket items.
Yeah,
they really are, smaller, less severe items that you probably should have passed anyway. But if you did at least get 88 out of 110, you have the option to proceed forward, with remediating those and then getting to the finish line. And it should be noted too that the finish line is not 88 out of 110. The finish line is all met or not applicable. Right? So,
right.
Even though that was last in 1.0, it was pretty much well known. Either it's all pass or fail.
Yep.
It's all pass or it's all fail. Now it's slightly different, but the result is pretty much still the same. You still have to either all pass, not applicable, or you fail.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind, and that's actually really important when you think about it from the time frame of, is it important for me to start looking at CMMC right now, or can I wait until next year when it becomes, a ratified?
That was going to be the last point I wanted to cover today.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So to that point of, do you want to wait? Of course not. Because when 2023 comes around and CMMC rolls out, it'll be coming like an 18-wheeler downhill.
Yeah. It puts you in a precarious situation if you decide to wait. When you think about it, you're not spending the money for it, but you're not spending the money for it, and that's a problem because we just spent the last few minutes talking about readiness assessments and how just complicated just that process can be, just getting ready for the assessment.
Right.
And if you're not thinking about it, you're not thinking about it, you're not lining up your resources to do that work for you. You're not verifying that you're getting closer to that finish line when everything happens next year. It's going to be like a train coming through a tunnel. You're going to be right there at the entrance of that, of that tunnel, and you're gonna have a problem because number one, you're probably not going to be able to find any resources to be able to help you.
Right.
C3PAOs, which again in my opinion, are your best option for doing this work. They're going to be busy. I mean, we're busy now. But they're going to be even busier then. And then of course, the big problem is that you aren't going to be competitive when you're going after some of those contracts because you're going to have companies that are saying, we're in the middle of doing our assessment. We're starting to do our assessment. We've done our assessment. We're ready. We're almost certified. And you're going to be starting out trying to figure out how to get ready for it. So you're already behind the curve and you're losing your competitive advantage.
I'm glad you mentioned about C3PAOs being so busy because we've had a few different, partners of ours that are C3PAOs who have said the same thing, that they are already booked well into 2023. And I'm sure you guys are having the same experience. I mean, there's only so many. That's such a great point to reiterate again, that if you are thinking of waiting, we're talking about there's likely maybe 6 to 7 months right now. We're in the end, we're the very beginning of December right now, 6 to 7 months right now. This could come out in contracts. And like you said, those people who have already done that work or already can prove that they're right at the end or very close are going to have that competitive edge over somebody who goes, oh, what's CMMC? Maybe I should do that. It'd be very different, very different.
We can use. You used at the entrance to a tunnel with a train coming at you full speed. I talked about a 18-wheeler going downhill, or given that it's the holiday seasons, it's like someone looking for a Santa suit on December 23rd.
Basically, yeah, exactly.
Trying to find milk and toilet paper right before a hurricane.
Right before a hurricane, right? Exactly. Yeah.
If you get any more, just send them in.
Yeah. Just don't procrastinate. That's all we can say. Just do it now. Don't procrastinate.
Yeah. I mean, this is a golden opportunity to start looking at it. And now, no one is saying that you have to go out and you have to spend $50,000 tomorrow. But start looking at it. Start evaluating where you are as a company. Whether you could skip. Maybe you can skip the gap assessment. You're okay with the skipping the gap assessment. If you are, you are. I mean, you have a really tight environment. But if you are, then you need to start talking to somebody about, well, let's do a dry run assessment to make sure that we are what we think we are, right?
Right.
Or you may be the kind of company that's just, you kind of run fast and loose. And so you're saying, well, you may need to spend a little bit more time than, because not only do you have to get these assessments done, which is, always a time constraint from the part of the C3PAO, but you have to leave yourself time to fix stuff.
That's a great point. Yeah.
That's the part that a lot of people forget.
Absolutely.
Don't leave yourself time to fix it. Then all you're doing is that you're discovering POAMs and issues and problems that you have, and you can't do the assessment until you get them fixed.
Right. Absolutely.
I think we're going to have to call it a wrap, Sese and my friend Noel. This has been great. I appreciate, Sese, for you taking the time out of your busy day to talk to us and inform our base.
Absolutely.
If people want to get in touch with you and learn about how they can get a dry run assessment or have you help them with a voluntary assessment, how do they reach out to you?
They can reach out to me. Our website is provincia.io, provincia.io. And my email address is sbennett, sbennett, at provincia.io, provincia.io. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk about CMMC.
And we'll make sure to put it in the show notes as well so people can get in touch with you. All right. So this is a wrap. Until next time. Thank you again.
Thank you.